the reception's been pretty good. And so we're already looking at like translating it into some other languages and getting it out there, because this is a global trend. It's everywhere's interested in this. So it's actually a long story, but I'll try and shorten it a bit. So we call in TikTok, I refer to it as short video. That's the category that everyone in China calls it, short video. So that's what I refer to it as well. Short video really began, the first big app for short video was something called Musical.ly, which was used mostly by teenage girls in Europe and America. But actually the app was from China. It was built by a team in Shanghai. So it's really the first Chinese app that was pretty successful in the West, but it was only successful with kids. And it was only successful for dancing and lip sync. Actually, lip sync was the big one. That was the big use case that people used to like sing along to songs, and also some goofy comedy as well. And so it sort of stuck there for a couple of years and was actually stagnating at one point towards the end. But then ByteDance, this company in China, which was already very successful, already very large, it was running a news aggregator called Toutiao, which is a household name in China. It's completely unknown outside China, but you can think of it as the Facebook newsfeed without the friends. Very successful. And they moved into doing short video. And so what they did is they cloned Musical.ly. Now, at the time, no one thought it'd be successful. For a couple of months at the beginning, it was pretty much a failure. But then they kicked in with the technology they have that they're famous for. The AI, machine learning, deep learning team they have in Beijing is amazing. And they do something called a recommendation engine, which is kind of like the opposite of a search engine. I guess you could think of it like that. Once they linked that up with the Musical.ly experience, it totally exploded. It became far more compelling and very, very addictive. You might notice that like when people use TikTok, once they get used to it, they can spend an hour, they can spend 2 hours on TikTok. All the technology in the back end is what makes that addictive. Okay. And we talk about that a lot in the book, actually. It's really key to understanding how it works. Okay. So yeah, they made this breakthrough in China, totally exploded, very successful in China. TikTok, about 6 months later, they said, okay, we're going to take an international version. And that's what TikTok is. It's the international version of Douyin, which is the original app in China. And they launched it first in Asia, in markets like Japan, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, etc. And it did extremely well in those markets. And then they eventually acquired Musical.ly and took it to the West as well. And now today, Donald Trump's talking about it, and it's banned in India, and everybody knows TikTok. And it's, yeah, crazy. It's a combination of factors, right? So there's no one reason why this app is where it is today. The technology is definitely very important. It's actually identified the community they've built around it. They're actually very good at fostering user-generated content communities. This company is extremely good at doing that. They localize the operations in almost every region around the world. And they've got a playbook that they use systematically. And then number 3, I think, is the growth team. Like they're extreme. They spent a lot on advertisement. I don't know if you know, in 2018, if you went on YouTube, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing a TikTok advert. Same on Facebook, same on Snapchat. So they spent wildly and boldly. In 2018, SoftBank gave them $2 billion. That helped a lot. And they spent that on flooding the world with adverts. And they were their strategy around that worked very well. They used the actual content from the apps. We talk about it in the book. It's a growth hack technique that they used quite effectively. Well, the reality of, in terms of your personal data as a TikTok user, TikTok does definitely, when you're in the app, it's watching you the whole time and it's logging every single tiny action that you make. But actually, it's no different from Facebook. Facebook does exactly the same, and Instagram does the same. It's pretty almost exactly in terms of like the level. If you're worried about TikTok, you should also be worried about Instagram, basically. And there is a case to be worried about Instagram, and there is a case to be, if you, I think it's totally legitimate if you are concerned about privacy to not use those platforms. It is a trade-off, right? You're getting a free service, and which means you are the product, right? I think there's a legitimate concern here. Some of it is hyped up and a little bit overblown. There's definitely politics has got involved. There's definitely geopolitics heavily involved, and America does seem to be, to some degree, scared of the rise of China, and particularly the technology aspect of China's rise is worrisome. More so with companies like Huawei, where it's hardware and it's basic infrastructure, things like 5G that would as a very low level infrastructure layer that everything will rely upon on top of that. That's a very legitimate concern, I feel. Whereas TikTok's something much higher up the stack. It's an entertainment level, and it's not a sort of basic infrastructure. But having said that, there is scope for it to be abused. It's a recommendation system. So in the TikTok experience, algorithms dictate what you see. It's not a human curation. It's not something where you can subscribe to accounts. People do that, but that's not the primary way that the content is surfaced to you. It's done by a very complex system of hundreds of algorithms in the background, which are all there to maximize the time you spend in the app, and that's why it's so addictive. But those could potentially be manipulated for nefarious means, and actually it would be quite difficult for us to know. It's not like on Twitter, where if Russia wants to play around with Twitter and open up millions of bot accounts, actually you can track that, and there are ways to see what's happening on the platform. It's much more difficult when you've got this black box. From a user perspective, it's a complete black box. You don't know why it's showing you this video. There could be a very legitimate reason for that, but you really have no. So TikTok today has got very light monetization. It's really in the early stages. It's further ahead in Asia than it is in Europe and North America. But it's even in Asia, it's still fairly early. In China, however, it's quite developed, and so China really is a window into the future of what TikTok will be. It's really nice because finally we have a platform that's where the China experience and the international experience, are quite similar. It's the same company, it's the same user experience, and we really can be very confident, and I know from speaking to ByteDance people, we can be very confident that what we see on Douyin today, there'll be a similar experience in North America and other markets in 12 to 18 months, let's say. So assuming it stays in the market, there is some risk there. But so to the China version, there's a lot of e-commerce in there. That's live streaming e-commerce, and that's also short video e-commerce. It's quite successful for certain categories. Things like gadgets, women's fashion, cosmetics. Actually, fruit works quite well, surprisingly, at least in China. So we can expect that kind of thing. And we've seen that TikTok has announced that they are working with Shopify, I think it is, recently. And also Walmart wants to be involved with the Oracle deal. And so both of these are indicators that there needs to be some cooperation in order to have that e-commerce fulfillment and that inventory brought onto the platform. So it's very likely that we will see something similar to China. Whether it's to the same extent, I don't know, because in China it really has been very successful. And it's a very volatile experience, in terms of you could make a lot of sales or no sales, and there's some in between, but when something really hits, it hits, and you can shift a lot. But a lot of the time, these videos won't hit that much. And then the other one's advertisement, which is actually the lion's share of revenue. At its heart, it is an advertisement business, and it's quite similar to Facebook in terms of how that works. The broad basics of that, time spent on the platform is the metric they want to maximize. Having said that, the videos are quite, the actual adverts themselves are quite compelling, and advertisers in China have found them quite effective. There is a learning curve. They do need to, they're a little bit difficult for brands to get their head around how to do an advertisement on TikTok, or how to run an account on TikTok. But I think brands on TikTok in the West, let's say, or in other parts of Asia, are very much working this out now, and sort of struggling with it. But that will change. I imagine that they will work out the best practices, and it will be very similar to China. The reason why it works so well is because an advert on TikTok, it looks extremely similar to just a normal TikTok video. And it's just insert, you've got one TikTok video, advert, next TikTok video. They're all full screen. They all play with sound, autoplay automatically with a very tiny, tiny little notification saying this is an advert that most people miss because it's at the bottom next to another block of text. Quite deliberate. What that means is, as an advertiser, you can create an advert that, if it looks like a piece of user-generated content, if it looks like a normal TikTok video, you can actually trick the user into thinking it's a TikTok video, and then they'll actually watch that for the first few seconds, enough time for you to actually hook them into your story, into your message, and then hopefully they'll watch the rest of it. So it's actually a little bit similar to TV ads in some respects. There's a call to action that pops up after, it's not there at the beginning, but once you get like 10 seconds into the video, it's a big button that appears, bam, and it starts flashing, and click, boom, boom, boom. And a lot of them are like direct to sale, takes you directly to the sales page or the sign up page, or if it's an app install ad, a lot of them are app install ads, so it's just straight to download. First off, if it let's say it doesn't, let's say there's worst case scenario, it's blocked from the market, then Facebook or YouTube will copy it and make their own version. There are some competitors in the market, there's Dub Smash, there's Triller, which are quite niche small players, but if there was a total ban, those guys could scale quickly. I guess my general point is it doesn't matter whether it's TikTok or a competitor. This experience that we know as short video, it's not going away. With the video's actual lengths in China there's several different lengths of video, 15-second being the shortest, up to like a minute. Once you've got a certain number of followers on the account, you can post longer and longer videos, up to 5 minutes. And even in China, they went as far as to release a movie. When COVID came out and everyone was stuck at home and couldn't go to the cinema, they brokered a deal with a big Chinese movie for the Spring Festival and released it through Douyin, and you could watch an entire 2-hour movie through the platform. What we saw 2 years ago in China is the platform was mostly considered something for young people, and the sort of content categories that we saw on there were closer to what I described earlier with Musical.ly, where most people perceived it as being a place for comedy skits, and still singing and dancing and oddball creations, which is much closer to where we are in most other, certainly most Western markets today. But where it is in China today is a platform quite similar to YouTube in terms of the diversity of content categories. There's just literally everything on there, all kinds of video content. And so that's where it will be in terms of content, I believe, in the future 12 to 18 months. And then also in terms of the types of people using it, you're going to see it will shift more to YouTube as well, where you'll get older and older people who are more comfortable not only watching TikTok videos, but also creating them. I'll give you an extreme example. My mother-in-law in China, she uses Douyin on a daily basis, and she makes videos on there on a daily basis. My mother-in-law is pretty typical, and she's just a very average woman of her generation within China, but that totally shocked me when I saw it for the first time earlier this year, and then I realized that actually it gotten that far. There's 600 million daily active users of the Chinese version of TikTok, so that's over half the Chinese internet is opening the app on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So I think we can get to that similar level of engagement in other markets. India was doing extremely well before it got banned. It was on course to be just as popular there as it is in China. The closest paradigm to think about it is YouTube, that it's a short form YouTube. Obviously, that's a very gross simplification, but it's a much better way to think about it than saying this is a Facebook or an Instagram, because there really is no social aspect to it beyond commenting on other people's videos and liking it, which is, again, quite similar to YouTube. You have YouTube comments and you can like and vote. So that kind of interaction is there, but I wouldn't call it a social network. Or even social media is kind of a little bit overemphasizing the social aspect here. Like YouTube is actually a really great way to think about this, because on YouTube, back in the day, if you think about 10 years ago, YouTube was really struggling with recommendation. The videos on the side that they recommended you were pretty bad. And a lot of people, it's kind of a joke how terrible they were. And then obviously Google made some amazing breakthroughs with deep learning over the past decade. And they leveraged all of that technology into making the recommendations eerily accurate. Some people today are like, oh my God, I can't believe it's how accurate the recommendations are on these platforms now. And so that transformation with YouTube is a really nice way to think about why TikTok's become so powerful, because it takes that even further. In terms of it's just one video after another, and you're constantly giving feedback to the algorithm because you have to swipe up or keep watching, and both of those are strong indications of your preference, right? So even by doing nothing, you're training the algorithm. In terms of revenue, it's still in the early stages. I mean, they're really just building out the team. Today, China's the cash cow with Toutiao, the one we mentioned before, the newsfeed, and then Douyin. Douyin today is the big driver. Those are the two flagships, and that's where all the money's coming from right now. But TikTok has huge potential to really make a dent in the advertisement duopoly of Facebook and Google. And we see the market share it's taken in China. It's got up to double-digit market share of all online advertisement spend. It's up to 12 or 14%. So that's from 2%. Maybe 3 years ago. It's just quite an amazing jump. And if they can replicate any kind of level of that success globally, then you've got a real sort of alternative to those two companies now, which would be, I think, a bit of competition in the market is probably good.